Hello. Today we are going to take up a well-known poem, The Love Song of J.Alfred Prufrock, written by the representative poet of 20th century, T.S. Eliot. Students, this session is going to be divided into two parts. First part is in the form of introductory information about the poet T.S. Eliot and about this poem, The Love Song of J.Alfred Prufrock. And in the second part of this session, we will analyze the first 22 lines of this poem. So, let's get started with the introduction to the poet. Thomas Stearns Eliot. This is the full name of T.S. Eliot. He is considered to be a towering figure in the field of the 20th century literature and criticism. This great literary artist is a versatile genius. He was a poet, playwright, essayist, and literary critic. Eliot was born on September 26, 1888 at St. Louis, US, and later on he moved to England in 1914. Students, he is an America-born British writer. He studied at Sorbonne, Paris, and Merton College, Oxford. From 1917 to 1919, T.S. Eliot worked as an assistant editor of the well-known magazine The Egoist. And in the same year, he established himself as a poet, but achieved celebrity with the publication of The Wasteland in 1922. This poem is considered to be the most influential literary piece in 20th century literature. Eliot also became the director for the publishers Faber and Faber in 1925. This great genius accepted British citizenship, or we can say he became formally a British citizen in 1927, although he moved to Britain in 1914. And in 1927, he renounced his American citizenship. This great genius received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948. Let's have a look at the very famous works written by T.S. Eliot. As I have already mentioned, that he was a versatile genius. He wrote poems, plays, and critical essays. First, we will talk about the famous poems written by T.S. Eliot. His first collection, Prufrock and Other Observations. Then there is a landmark poem of 20th century, that is The Wasteland. Then aerial poems, one more collection. Ash Wednesday is there, which was published in 1930. Then Four Quartet is also one of the very important poems. Now let's have a look at the poetic drama written by T.S. Eliot. Very famous one, Murder in the Cathedral, was written in 1935. Then Family Reunion in 1939. The Cocktail Party in 1949. And now let's have a look at the essays in literary criticism, because this great literary artist was not only a poet and dramatist, he wrote critical essays on the theory of poetry also. And to name a few are Tradition and Individual Talent, The Metaphysical Poets, Frontiers of Criticism, and The Three Voices of Poetry. So student, this is just in brief about this great writer who is considered to be one of the most influential writers of 20th century. And now we will have a brief introduction with the poem which is prescribed for your syllabus, that is the love song of J. Prufrock. This poem was first published in June 1915 in Poetry, a magazine of verse, and later on in 1917 it was included in Eliot's collection of poems Prufrock and Other Observations. Students, this poem aims to expose the sordid nature of modern civilization. Or we can say this poem marks a complete break with the 19th century poetic tradition, and it is urban in its theme and setting. It reveals the ugliness of modern civilization. It also brings to limelight the hollowness and hypocrisy of modern civilization. Students, this poem, as the title suggests, that it's a love song, but it is not a love song in the traditional sense of the word. It is not a spontaneous outburst of the feelings of the lover for the beloved. Rather, it is an analysis of the mind of the lover who is unable to take a decision about making the proposal to the lady he loves. And here, that lover is Prufrock, or to be more clear about the lover which is presented in this poem by T.S. Eliot, we can say Prufrock is a citizen of Eliot's poetic world, a representative of disillusioned modern world, because he is unable to take decision, he is unable to express what he wants. So now let's begin with the poem. So here is the text on your screen. Students, the poem opens with an epigraph borrowed from famous Italian poet Dante's poem Inferno, which is a part of his very well-known epic Divine Comedy. You must have heard the name of this epic. Before moving further about the context or the meaning of this epigraph, let's first understand what is an epigraph. Students, an epigraph is a short quotation, phrase or poem that is placed at the beginning of another piece of writing to encapsulate that work's main theme and to set the tone. And here, the initial 6 lines of the poems are taken from the 27th canto of this Dante's poem Inferno, and Inferno is a poem that traces a pilgrim's journey through hell, where this pilgrim meets various sinners who narrate their story, their sufferings. And these lines are spoken by one of the peoples imprisoned in hell, and the name of that character is Guido da Montefeltro. And when the pilgrim asks Guido why he has been punished, then Guido responds with these words, which are the epigraph of T.S. Eliot's poem. And the English translation of the Italian text is there on your screen. If I thought that my reply were given to anyone who might return to the world, this flame would stand forever still. But since never from this deep place has anyone returned alive, if what I hear is true, without fear of infamy, I answer thee. On the literal level, here Guido is telling the pilgrim that he feels free to talk about his sins, because he knows that no one can ever return from hell. So the pilgrim will never be able to tell the story of those sins to anybody. But now here the question is that why Eliot chose these lines as the epigraph for his poem. There are 2 reasons. For one, it is a striking direct address that promises secrets told in confidence. And since this poem, Prufrock, is a dramatic monologue, so these lines set up the expectation of direct address. Because here in this poem, the speaker of Prufrock himself will address the readers directly, and reveal his secrets, just as Guido addresses the pilgrim. And secondly, the allusion to Dante's Inferno is also suggestive because it positions the world of Prufrock in dialogue with Dante's Hell. As we have discussed, that the theme of this poem is the exposure of the sordid nature of modern civilization. So here the effect of including this epigraph is to suggest that the speaker of Prufrock is also trapped in a kind of hell, that is the hell of modern life, from where he can't escape. So this is how this epigraph sets the tone of this poem, which reflects the modern civilization. Now let's begin with the line 1 of the poem. Let's go then, you and I. So look, here the poem begins with a direct address to someone, though it is never entirely clear throughout the poem that who this is. It might be the reader or the listener, or as the later lines will suggest, the speaker might be talking to a female lover. In any case, although the poem is characterized by inaction and frustration, it is very striking to know that these opening lines feature such forward momentum. The speaker asks the reader or the listener to go with him. Where? When the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table, let's go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. From the very beginning, the speaker asks the reader and listener to go with him through the streets of the city at night, and it seems to be an evening stroll. And from the very opening, as we see that the scene is more unsettling than welcoming, because the evening is described as spread out against the sky like a patient. That evening is presented as a patient etherized upon table, and it is a disconcertingly medical simile that compares the night sky to an anesthetized patient awaiting surgery, and the result is a feeling that nature itself is cold and unwelcoming place, more characterized by artificiality than natural feeling. So, and the further, the speaker's description of the city streets develops this sense that there is something disturbing about the world depicted in the poem, because the streets are half deserted, empty streets are there, and strangely these streets are empty of people, and instead of people remain indoors in disreputable environments like one night cheap hotels or sawdust restaurants. So the implication is that these places are used for prostitutions or seedy muttering transactions. And after the opening quotation from Dante, which has depicted the hell, the reader of Prufrock might begin to feel in these lines that the poet is describing a modern version of hell in this threatening, hostile urban landscape. And let's see what he further says about the streets. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious event. Here, the poet compares the streets of that very city to a tedious argument, because streets which follow one another are like never-ending argument. And this comparison with the never-ending argument denotes that the destination is unknown, where these streets are moving. And secondly, there he is talking about the intent of that argument is insidious. So this argument being insidious indicates or suggests that there is something malicious or dangerous about these streets. And what he calls the argument seems to be leading to to lead you to an overwhelming question. What he calls the argument seems to be leading somewhere to an overwhelming question. However, just when it seems like the speaker is about to ask the question, the ellipses, there are ellipses, blank spaces, and they show that these ellipses, they just create a sensation of surprise. And then the speaker, Prufrock, he quickly differs and changes the subject, and he says, "Oh, don't ask, what is it?" This is how that he expresses that there is a question, but he is not willing to reveal what that question is. So here, instead of asking the question that seems to bothering him, the speaker invites his listener to make our visit to a certain room. And what is specific about that room? In that room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Here, the ladies, they are talking of Michelangelo, but they do not know much about his art. So there is a satire on the pretentious nature of modern ladies. So this is how that in these opening lines, T.S. Eliot has just set the tone, what he wants to say. He has just portrayed the threatening and hostile urban landscape and the people which that speaker Prufrock has in his surroundings, and also the indecisive nature of the speaker, because he doesn't know where he is moving. He is moving on he just wants to go on the streets which are just like tedious arguments. And secondly, there is a question in his mind, but he is not ready to reveal what that question is. So a sort of uncertainty, a sort of indecisiveness, a sort of inaction is portrayed in this opening part. Let's move further. What the poet says: the yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains. Let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. Here, in the previous stanza, he is talking about the women, talking about Michelangelo. So rather than participating in the conversation described in the previous stanza, the speaker instead seems distracted by the yellow fog outside the windows of some building, perhaps the same in which the women are talking. And this is another of the many abrupt digressions that appear in the poem, in which the speaker's mind does not seem to be on his immediate social context, instead turns to other, seemingly irrelevant topics, a tendency that indicates his alienation from others. That how first he is talking about the ladies who are having a discussion on Michelangelo, and then the very next moment he just digresses from that very scene, and he is just now focusing on the fog. So from the speaker's description in these lines, this seems that like no ordinary fog, for one which is yellow fog, and it is yellow because it reflecting the light of the street lights and perhaps the pollution and the smoke from an industrial city. The yellow color of the fog makes it seem artificial and not natural, a product of human industry rather than natural phenomena. So this reflects the poem's broader connection between modernity and alienation. The technology of modern world does not make life better, but rather fills the streets with a threatening looking fog. And if we look at this text which is there on your screen very carefully, the fog is also described in unusual human terms, because according to the speaker, it rubs its back, as it is written in the first line, and then in the second, rubs its muzzle on the window panes, then it licks its tongue, then it leaps, and then lastly curls around the houses in the last line on the screen. This description does not sound like fog at all. It sounds like a cat. So the effect of this personification describing fog as if it were being with thought and agency is profoundly unsettling, because it makes it seem as if the fog has a malevolent life of its own, separate from the humans who live in the city. So, in this passage, Prufrock reflects his own mental fogginess, that he is not being able to pursue the course of the fog. So, this is how this poem opens with a reflection of the speaker Prufrock's mental state, and his inner restlessness is echoed by the outside surroundings. So this is all about in this first session. We will take up the next part of the poems in the next video. Thank you.